Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Travis Escobar. I am the founder and board chair of Millennial Rhode Island, and I want to thank you all for watching our second installment of Millennials Making Moves. Again, this is by Millennial Rhode Island, a nonprofit focusing on inspiring young people to live in the state. We do that by connecting young Rhode Islanders together through professional and personal development opportunities. And this series is dedicated to spotlighting millennials, our members of other generations that's looking to move our generation and our state forward. Today is our second part series of showcasing individuals running for office. 2020 is the most important election of our lifetime, and it's important to showcase ways that we can make true change in our community. And being elected to office is one of the best ways to make it happen. So again, thank you all for viewing this stream. You could be viewing anything else online, but you're here with us today, and I really appreciate that. And for now, I'd like to transition to Chris Parisi, President of Trailblaze Marketing, who's going to explain the format of our series.
Thank you, Travis. Well said. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to introduce our panelists today. I'm Chris Parisi. I'm also a board member of Millennial RI, a great nonprofit, 501c3. So obviously we're not endorsing any candidate here, but we do want to elevate their voice and talk about, when it comes to running for office. So the format is that anyone can interact with us. So whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, you can write a comment in the section, and then we can pull that up and ask the candidates any questions that you have. So first, Travis will ask some questions, and then once we see some interactive questions through Facebook or Twitter, we'll pull them up. So keep that in mind so that you can be involved with this process as well. So thank you. And now, Ben, let's bring on the guests.
So for our panelists, at first, we're going to just have you give a brief introduction about yourself. Keep it sort of a Twitter bio. Keep it short. But Senator Oyer, we'll start with you.
Hi, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. My name is Dawn Oyer. I represent Senate District 13, which is Newport and Jamestown, and I have been in office since I won a special election in 2017.
Jason?
Yeah, my name is Jason Royas. I'm a resident of Providence, Rhode Island. Ran for City Council 2018, and now I just manage campaigns.
And Councilman Acosta.
Thank you, Travis, and thank y'all for having me. My name is Jonathan Acosta. I am a PhD student at Brown, a former educator, a youth wrestling coach, and a member of the City Council in Central Falls, where I've served for 2 terms. And now I am running for State Senate to represent District 16, which encompasses all of Central Falls and Port Pawtucket.
Again, thank you all for being here today. Our first question, pretty simple, but what made you want to run for office? And Jason, I'm actually going to start with you because you're a campaign manager for multiple campaigns. You've successfully managed campaigns in the past, but you were a candidate yourself in 2018. So yeah, please talk to us about what made you want to run for office for council in 2018, and sort of what's inspiring you to manage other campaigns this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I ran for office in 2018 because I just wanted to make a change. In 2018, and still holds true to this day, Providence, we were in and still are, we're in a pretty crazy affordable housing crisis. We're giving tax incentives to wealthy developers and big corporations. In my neighborhood specifically, we used to pride ourselves on having great youth sports teams that no longer exist. There was a lack of community input. So whatever was going on at the city level, the residents of my neighborhood, they were not informed and they weren't aware of what was going on. So that's why I ran for office. And one of the reasons why I'm, managing campaigns now is because, since running my own campaign back in 2018, against a candidate who has never had an opponent, I've decided that I really wanted to make it a point where I want to manage campaigns for progressive candidates and who are almost always at a disadvantage when it comes to money and connections and resources. But, through thoughtful policy and do it like a thoughtful policy platform that speaks to the needs of the community, which they're trying to represent, through thoughtful organizing and strategy, I've been able to help first-time progressive candidates overcome the hurdles of big money and oftentimes unseat establishment incumbent candidates. So that's the reason why I ran, and that's why I'm managing campaigns now.
And for answering to run for office, we'll go with Councilman Acosta, and then after Senator Oyer.
Thank you. Given that this is a millennial event, it's only right to invoke some of the influences on millennials. And so I grew up in the thick of the Tupac versus Biggie debate. Tupac had a big influence on my life as a kid. One of the things that he taught me, in addition to my own lived experience, is that America hates poor people. We treat poor people as if they were parasites, and we treat them as outsiders of the body politic. And so growing up as a low income person, I always looked around, and as I was reaching escape velocity, realizing that it took so many supports to get one kid out. Support in the form of health insurance provided by the state, support in the form of food programs, informal support in the form of what some Africana intellectuals would call other mothers who were providing childcare for me when I was a kid, and so many other things. And so when I looked around as I was getting older and living that in my own life, right? Like I had benefited from those things. And so I was an educator. I worked at the youth center. I was a youth wrestling coach. I was getting involved and realizing that so many of the things that we had as problems in 1996 when changes came out were still problems in 2016 when I was running for office. We were still at war in the Middle East. We were still in a war on drugs. We still hated poor people. We still had no ethno-racial solidarity between people, right? I was a kid when we built the jail right here in Central Falls. We had no voice. My people had no voice at that time. And so as I was getting a voice, I realized, like, as you said, one of the biggest impacts you could have to make a change is to get involved. And so I ran for local office and started having some of those impacts, but not to the degree that I would want to. And so when we were marching on the Wyatt, our state senator wasn't there. When they were cutting our school funding, our state senator wasn't there. When our city council submitted a resolution asking that both sides of the General Assembly support a woman's right to choose, our state senator reneged on her commitment to support that. And so that pissed me off. And I was like, all right, then it's time to play. Like, if that's how you want to go, then I'm going to be the change then. And if I'm not, at least I'm going to have a bunch of people wake up to the fact that y'all are still punking us with the problems from 1996 and acting as if we didn't learn anything from back then. We learned. I got out and I came back. And I'm here to tell everybody what I saw outside of this cave.
Oh, that was great. That was powerful. Thank you for sharing all that, Councilman Acosta. Senator Oyer, how about you? Sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, so I had a long history of running campaigns, being a grassroots community organizer. I actually helped lead the campaign to legalize marriage equality in Rhode Island. And part of that exercise was to make sure that people stepped up and ran for office on a strong platform of shared values. And so, I had that history of being a community organizer, a strong environmentalist, and, the seat opened up. Well, backing up, so Trump got elected in 2016. And it was interesting because some of the things that I've been organizing around my whole life and talking about my whole life, after Trump got elected, I had friends of mine who were, Dawn, I always thought you were crazy with all of your activist stuff, but you might have been onto something. And so, then the seat opened up, the Senate seat opened up where I was living. And, I, very typical as a woman, got probably about 5 or 6 calls and thought, okay, yeah, I guess I can run for office. I never intended. I'm not somebody who grew up thinking I'm going to run for office one day, but I think that just the being compelled into it to basically be able to fight for all of the things that I care about, to be able to fight for working people, to be able to fight for the environment. I remember when I first ran for office, people told me not to talk about housing because the problem was too big and there was nothing that we could do. And now there's been a big statewide push on the housing conversation, and I'm glad to see that, and I'm glad to have been able to be a small part of that in my campaign. So, really, it was just about all of the things that I wanted, that I've been advocating for, and that I've been organizing around, and seeing the opportunity to be able to be the one to cast the vote, and to be able to be the one to help drive the conversation, and to be able to make change and make policy. I thought was really compelling. So that's really what drove me to run.
One common theme, real quick, Travis, is none of you really planned on running for office at some younger point of your life. But you all had this desire for change, for a better place, and you took it upon yourself. And one of our messages in this Millennials Make and Move series is explaining to our fellow millennials, or Gen X or Gen Z, that you can run for office, that you can create the change that you need. And one of the things is we're trying to peel back the many onion layers of running for office. So one question that we do have for all of you that tries to help explain that is, what is this process to run for office? Because right now, a lot of people think it's this very complicated, impossible thing, but we're trying to show that you can do it, that anyone can run for office. So we do want to start with you, Jason, coming from the campaign manager side, and then we'll end with you, Councilman Acosta, to wrap up the question of what is the process for running for office?
Yeah, so I mean, Barack Obama, he once said, if you don't like the person that's in power, grab a clipboard, start collecting signatures, and run for office. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing, definitely butchered the quote. And I definitely wasn't as eloquent as what Obama, I imagine, said. But the process, it depends. It certainly depends on the district that you're running in, and what seat you're running for. Now, if you're someone like Senator Dawn Ure that's on this chat right now, or for someone like Jonathan Acosta, right, running for a state senator is no easy feat, right? It's a much larger district compared to like a city council district. So it's certainly no easy feat. And in my opinion, it's not really designed for first-time candidates. It's really not. And nor is it designed for folks that do not come from affluent families, because unfortunately for campaigns, you need money, right? You need a lot of money, maybe not a lot of money, but you need a good amount for mailers and to pay for staff and things like that. I know when I first ran for office in 2018, I was 21 years old, and it was definitely a crazy process. Don't quote me on this, and we can certainly fact check it, but I think I was the only city council candidate in Rhode Island history that had a sitting lieutenant governor, sitting mayor, sitting U.S. senator, and the head of the Democrat committee to campaign against me, and that was fun. So if you're asking me about that process, I could tell you it sucked and it wasn't easy. But managing campaigns, it's fun, it's awesome. So I love playing chess. I love playing dominoes, right? Chess and dominoes, both games are mind games. And for me, campaigning is just one big it's one big mind game, right? What is your opponent going to say about you? Okay, so what can you do to maybe cancel out some of your opponent's talking points against you? What can you say about your opponent? Like, what's some of the data? Like, what are your talking points? What's the messaging going to be for this campaign? So it's so many different things, but the process isn't a difficult one. It certainly isn't, and I encourage everyone to get involved.
Thank you. Senator Oyer, if you could kind of take it from more of a tactical level on the state Senate side, what's that process like, trying to run for office when it comes to signatures and all those types of things?
Yeah, so running for state senate, I mean, my first time around was a little unique because I ran in a special election, and so anybody who was interested in politics in the state of Rhode Island, I think, got involved in my special election, both with me and against me. There was four candidates in the primary, four candidates in the general election. We all had a big campaign teams behind us trying to turn out voters. And so the first step really is to declare your nomination, which sounds a lot more complicated than it is. It literally is you have to submit a piece of paper to the local board of canvassers declaring your intent to run for office. And then after that, you have to collect signatures. And so for the Senate seats, you have to collect 100 signatures, and it has to be 100 signatures from qualified registered voters that are qualified to vote in your district. So I think that, for me, I found the signature gathering to be a good part of it. Kind of helped me, get a little bit of practice talking to voters and understanding, basically what that process was like, because at that point I had only filed my paperwork, but then you actually have to go out and talk to voters. So then they check and make sure you get the required number of signatures, and then from there, really, I think there's people who run primarily social media campaigns, but really it's about getting out and talking to voters and talking about the things that you care about and the things that the voters care about in your district, the hot ticket items. So a lot of conversations, a lot of long nights on the phones, knocking on doors, a lot of wrong phone numbers that you end up dialing people who don't even live in Rhode Island anymore, but happen to still be on the phone list. So it's a lot of long nights, but I found that enjoyable. I really did. I enjoy hearing from constituents and hearing what the voters are concerned about. And I think that's, that part of campaigning, that connection that you have with the voters in your district and the different ways that you can reach out to them, whether social media. I mean, obviously this year with COVID, everything is different. That makes it more complicated. And I think all of us are trying to figure out different ways to reach out to actually contact voters in this election cycle, but a lot of conversations.
So I guess I'll jump in and say that I've run now for a very local municipal office, and now I'm running for state senate, and those experiences have been very, very day and night. I felt like I didn't choose to run as much as it chose me the first time, and so the person who was the Ward 1 council person was retiring, and the leadership and the kind of already politically involved folks in the community needed someone to run. They couldn't find somebody to run. And so when I agreed, given my involvement in the city already, people were overwhelmingly supportive. When you're kind of in the establishment, everybody has your back. You have access to van because the Democratic Party wants you in office. And then it was almost like a switch was flicked, because all those folks are helping you meet people. They're walking with you. You're meeting voters, and that part's awesome. I think the best part about running for office at any level is meeting the residents or the constituents that you're going to represent. I think fundamentally what people want the most is to be heard, and then a follow-up to being heard. So if there's a problem expressed, that you at least circle back and try to address that problem. But then running for state office, the way that power is wielded, I think, in our state is very invisible to most people. And so once I wasn't part of the establishment, once I was running against the establishment, then you see the tentacles everywhere. And so, I had somebody in a meeting ask me just straight up, flat out, if you won, would you vote for Dominic Ruggiero? And I was like, why are we having this conversation right now? What does that have to do with the people of Central Falls and Pawtucket? What does that have to do with my policy platform, with my ideology? Nothing. All that mattered was that the person in power was guaranteed a vote regardless of who was elected to that seat. And that blew my mind, but also kind of schooled me to the game that these folks are playing. They don't care about Central Falls and Pawtucket. They care about a vote for continued power. And so that's been my experience so far. I'm still knocking doors. I'm still talking to people. And that's still the best part of this process. But those people don't get to know that that's how the rest of the state thinks about them. That's what the rest of the state cares about. They see them as consumers. And so they'll buy them off with a policy or a park or what have you every few years. And then you shut up and you stay in your corner. You make sure you vote for the right leadership. So that part has been very disgusting for me as a state Senate candidate. But my constituents don't care about those folks. My constituents care about their community. And so to Jason's point about chess, I feel like I haven't even had to play chess. I've been so transparent about who I am, and people know me because I've been here for a while, that if you try to lie about me, it always backfires. So one of my opponents tried to tell a constituent that I was a Trump supporter, and in 24 hours, that constituent had put up 25 lawn signs for me. Because once you poke the bear like that, people are going to get upset. They know if you're lying. And so I think people are much smarter than we give them credit for. And so if you're going to lie on somebody, it's going to blow up in your face if that person has always kept it real. And that's what I've done, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. Sorry, my son just got here from school.
To continue on with the theme in terms of, I think we're all talking about sort of lessons that we've learned. What's sort of the biggest lesson you've learned since running for office? Could be something either about yourself or your community. Councilman Acosta, I know you have your child there, but we'll start with you, and then we'll go with Jason and Senator Oyer.
So part of my answer is based on my academic experience. So I study political sociology, and for a long time I was studying charismatic authority and charismatic leaders. The biggest and most important lesson to me is that it can't be about you as a candidate, right? You will come and go, you will die. And so what is the message that you leave behind? What's the framework that you leave behind? I'm very lucky that at a local level, there's a big group of like-minded people who were all running together on similar platforms. At a state level, I happen to be part of a group, the Rhode Island Political Cooperative, where all the candidates have agreed on the same policy platform. Now, some of us want to go a little bit further. Some of us are like right there, like we push them right to the line on particular issues, but we all agree. That way, if someone loses, the message lives on. If someone wins, you have something to hold them accountable to. The first presidential election I voted in was Barack Obama 2008. I just turned 18. I was voting. I was super excited. And as I look back, I realized that as a voter, what I voted on was hope and change. It's really hard to hold somebody accountable for hope and change. It's not very substantive. It's a great message. It's succinct. It sells. It gets people excited. But where was the rest of the framework? What was the other stuff we were supposed to implement? And I'm trying to leave as much of that laid out as possible. I'm doing weekly sessions where I talk about a problem and a policy proposal to address it. You don't have to like me. Most people don't like me, right? Like, especially because of how I look and how anti-traditional politics I am. People don't like me, but you have to respect the substance of what we're putting out. And so talk to me about minimum wage. Talk to me about an affordable housing line item. Talk to me about refixing the school funding formula and increasing the coefficient on urbanicity, right? Like, those are real things that have nothing to do with me as an individual or as a candidate. And all these folks need to pay attention to that. Forget me, right? I don't mean anything. I'm not going to be here forever. Forget everybody who's running. What is their message and how do we implement that message? And that's how, as voters, we need to start moving, and how, as candidates, we need to start behaving. That's what we need to be pressed to put on. Yeah, my biography is great. Like, thank you, all this stuff. That's awesome. And what I plan to do is dope too, as a person. But what is the policy that I want to bring to the table? And that's, I think, the biggest lesson for me so far in my life in politics.
I think for me, there's two lessons. I mean, the first lesson, don't canvas in boat shoes, right? It's like the worst experience ever, for real. Like, mad blisters on my ankles, like my back was hurting. So I that's like the first lesson. The second lesson, I wasn't alone, right? So there's a community of first-time candidates that do not know what the hell they're doing. right? I had no clue what I was doing. I did not know anything about infrastructure. Like when I first started canvassing, my palm cards, it was literally like sheets of paper that I printed for my house, and I was handing it out. It was crazy. It looked like I was inviting people to a car wash. It was nuts. But after the campaign, I started talking to other candidates, and they were all telling me, "Yeah, I didn't know what the hell I was doing either." So I was like, "All right, good. Like we both didn't know what the hell we were doing." So what's something you think you did right, and what's something that you think you did wrong? And so I've continued those conversations. I've continued those conversations since 2018, since I ran with various candidates. But if there's one thing that I really learned, and it's part of the reason why I'm now behind the scenes helping candidates, is that we have a political landscape that is changing on a local level and on a national level. For far too long, we've had conservative Democrats who have dominated the Rhode Island politics. And, I really try to get behind candidates who are, one, connected to their own community, right? Like I would never help out a carpetbagger. Like I'm never going to do that. Two, if their values represent the changing times, right? Do they support significant reforms in policing, affordable housing, rent control, environmental protections? And are they strong supporters of public education? Things like that. So those are the two lessons. So seriously, do not canvass in boat shoes. Like, don't ever do that.
That's funny. Now, Senator Oyer, I'm not sure if you would canvass in boat shoes or heels, but what are some of the lessons that you have learned?
I almost never wear heels. Fun fact. But I have canvassed on my bike, actually, which my campaign staff gets a trip out of because I'll put on my helmet, throw some lit into my backpack, and pedal off to wherever my turf is to walk for the day. So that's definitely a good way to canvass, probably better than boat shoes. I would say the biggest thing is, this is going to sound trite, but really active listening. There are so many, with national politics being the dumpster fire that it is, I think the pressure is even greater on states to be the solution and to provide a bridge. And I think that people are very rightfully frustrated in that they don't think that government works because very intentional efforts to dismantle and defund important government programs over the years. And for me, as somebody who believes that government plays an important role, protecting health, safety, welfare of our population, there are important regulatory roles we need to be playing. And there's important social safety nets that we need to be providing. It's also important what we're investing our money in. So, having the power of the budget, our budgets are our values, and what are we investing in? And, people are rightfully frustrated. And so being able to, I think one of the hardest things is, as an elected official and as somebody in a position of power to be able to make change, it's easy to want to be able to just say, oh yeah, I'm going to fix all of that. The reality is we as elected officials have our role and we have a place, and it's a very important one. And to create some larger systemic change that we need to see in areas like climate change, like housing security, like undoing the new Gilded Age that we're living in, it can't just be us in elected office, but it really is the whole community to work together. And so understanding my role in this social movement in this time that we're in as an elected leader, to be able to provide a voice, to be a change, to make the votes, but also to listen to what the community wants, to what the community needs, and to be able to make sure that that's what I'm prioritizing and that's what I'm fighting for.
Thank you. And you mentioned how true change is really going to come from the community. And sometimes you have to create that change yourself, but working with great, representatives, senators, council It's important, and that's what we did with the Rhode Island Small Business Coalition, is that we formed a coalition of small business owners saying, hey, we need help, we need to help each other, and we need to demand what we need in order to survive as small businesses. Rhode Island is known for our small businesses. They're the backbone of our economy. And just like Councilman Acosta said, policy's important. That's really what we're talking about when it comes to substance. So starting with you, Councilman Acosta, what are some policies that you would change or put in place to support our Rhode Island small businesses?
Or grow, right? Or expand. And I like that slip. That might have been Freudian. I think it will be Senator in a few months. So I appreciate that. But look, what I'll say about small businesses, and I want to open with this first, is that I had a conversation on Facebook Live with Moira Walsh, with Rep. Moira Walsh last week. And often we get pinned in this wall between workers and small businesses. And so one of the things she said, which I think is very true, is if you're going to open a business, then you are responsible for being successful in that business and being able to pay your workers well. And so I don't think there's an excuse to not pay people a living wage, regardless of the size of your business or how many people there are in it. That said, I want to take everybody real quick on a trip to Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee and remember Sal's Pizzeria, right? That was a family-owned business in a community that family no longer wanted to be a part of. They just wanted to profit off of. And one of the things that I think we've seen some success in is a FUBU strategy, for us, by us, right? When people were threatening riots, no one was threatening to throw a rock or a brick through any of the Central Falls businesses because we knew those people. We know those owners, and a lot of those owners live in our city, right? And so we have to be careful with when we make policies, who gets to take advantage of them. So Jason was talking about tax breaks earlier, right? Like if you are from the community and you want to open a business in the community, I think you are in a separate bucket than someone from outside of the community. And we found ways in Central Falls at the very local level to provide some of those incentives, both not just through who the owner is, but also who you employ, right? So taking the historical lens and remembering the failure that was 38 Studios, one of the biggest parts of that failure were that the labor was all imported, right? All the people that we wanted to hire, all the engineers and the programmers were people from outside of Rhode Island. So why the hell did we give them so much state money to do that? Right? Why did we give them so many tax breaks and all state funds to bring people from somewhere else? If you're going to hire Rhode Island people, do business in Rhode Island, and live in Rhode Island, then we're going to give you a little bit of extra love. Not a lot of extra love. Because one of the programs that I really loved that the governor implemented, which we saw the fruits of right here in Central Falls and in Pawtucket, was the facade program, the facade improvement program. And so through that program, businesses could apply to have essentially their infrastructure upgraded. And the state would cover the overwhelming majority of the cost. I think it was about 75%. And the business would have to pay the other 25%. Now, one of the questions I had is, why don't we have this for properties too, residential properties? Because we have a lot of dilapidated housing in my community. But I think we need to expand programs like that and grow them. And one of the things I liked about that program is it had a commitment where you had to keep your business there. You couldn't just upgrade your business and then sell it, right, to make a quick profit off of the improvements that you made. You had to stay there for a certain period of time. And so I say we expand that, we bring that back, we help people invest in infrastructure. But if the housing around the small businesses isn't improving, people aren't going to go to those businesses. They're not going to be patrons in neighborhoods where the rest of the neighborhood is a slum. And so invest in the housing around it and invest in the businesses itself, but make sure it's for us, by us, always the priority.
Thank you. Very community driven, which is important for our long-term success in our city and state. Senator Oyer, you've wrote some policies. What are some policies that you would do for small businesses here in Rhode Island?
So one of the things that I find really interesting in this conversation around small businesses is that we have to remember that the federal definition around small businesses looks at, I think it's anything under 500 employees.
Right.
But the reality is most of Rhode Island's businesses are, 10 to 20 people, maybe even under that. And there's a drastic difference between running a business with 50 people versus running a business with 2 or 3 people. Just the operations, the mechanics, everything is different. And piece of what came out when the federal program with the PPP loans came out, I remember I talked to so many small businesses who were like, I don't even understand the paperwork they need. The Fed said this is a streamlined policy. Here's the paperwork, it's easy. But then when you dug into the details and you tried to understand what documentation people needed to provide in order to access that capital, it didn't apply. It wasn't things that people operating a dual, like a 2-person or 3-person LLC or a sole proprietorship wouldn't have that type of documentation. So I think from a regulatory perspective, we need to be realistic about the burdens that some of that paperwork causes. And we need to, when we're looking at, again, both funding programs, funding the programs and also providing the other paperwork to the state, there needs to be an understanding about what that burden is on these micro businesses, these under 10 people, that, by the way, are the ones who are more strapped for capital, are going to be, less resilient during economic hardships. They're more likely for us to lose those micro businesses, which are the ones that do truly give back to the community, do truly give back to the local economy. So I don't think it's one policy, but I think it's an integrated approach when we're looking at all policies. When we are funding these programs, how are we doing it equitably? How are we making sure that there was just a conversation about Black and brown business owners not being able to access capital, and the disparities in the unbanked population being able to access these programs. So I think that's really what we need to focus on, because if we're going to focus on small business as a way for folks to be able to be self-sufficient, and to be able to support their community, support their families, we need to make sure that we're making those investments in a way that truly gets to the people that need it, that need that help.
Thank you, Senator Arya. Now we're going to go to individual questions. I definitely want to remind people that are watching on Facebook, I've seen a few comments. If you have any questions for our panelists, after the individual questions, we'll go toward that. And we'll start with Jason. So you ran for city council in 2018. You've managed multiple successful campaigns, and now managing multiple campaigns this cycle. I'm personally really interested in the aspect of the difference of, you're the candidate, you see your last name, on signs, put on a neighborhood. What's the difference from your experience between being a candidate, having your name on the ballot, and now, coaching people to win their own individual race?
Yeah, I mean, so when I ran in 2018, I was, like I said, I was going up against a 10+ year incumbent. Who has never faced an opponent. So a lot of the times I was criticized, and folks were yelling at me for running for office. How dare you participate in democracy, right? But one thing that I can say is that it's a lot different, right? I mean, I think everyone loves the person that can put someone in office, but if you're in office, you're subjected to criticism and everything and things like that. It's really, really different. And I truthfully, I think I enjoy being behind the scenes more than I like being, the face of the campaign. Right now, so as you said, Travis, I'm managing 3 campaigns, managing Maura Walsh's, Representative Walsh's reelection bid. I'm managing Jose Batista, who's running in District 12 right now on the South Side, and I'm also managing Melinda Lopez's campaign in Johnson. She's running for District 43 for state rep seat there. And I got to tell you, one, I do not have any type of social life, which is fine. I signed up for this. And two, what's great is I don't really have to knock on doors as much as the candidate does. So that's definitely good. in all seriousness, you know, the difference between being behind the scenes and being, you know, the face of the campaign. I think when you're behind the scenes, you can really, I think you can. I think you can enact change faster than you can as a candidate. And the reason why I say that is because if, let's just say, I get these 3 folks elected, or I help to get them elected. Now it's 3 great candidates. There are 3 great elected officials that are in office, right? And with me running for office and I get elected, I'm just one. Now, you know, 3 beats 1, and so for me personally, I just think it's a lot better being behind the scenes. I don't know if I answered your question, Travis, so I'm sorry. I was, you know, still in awe by, you know, what Jonathan and with Councilman Acosta and what the senator said about the tax stuff, and I completely agree with you guys. And by the way, Chris and Travis, if you guys ever make me go last after Jonathan and Dawn, we're gonna have beef.
All right. Well, you went first, and you did a great job. You did answer, you know, that question for us. I'll take the next one, Travis, and this is to Councilman, soon-to-be Senator Acosta, perhaps. My Freudian slip last time. Maybe you are right. But how has your experience as a city council person helped shape your run for Senate?
Yeah, so I think most people, even those who don't like me, will agree that I am both a fast learner and a very fast reader. And so my attention to detail on the reading part has really allowed me to understand the interconnectedness, but also limits of the different layers of government. And so the issues that I really care about, education, housing, wages, energy, are issues that you need some things to happen at the municipal level, but really where the big change comes from is from the state level. The federal level has some influence, mostly in the form, honestly, of treats, right? So there's a stick or there's like a money incentive, but that's it. States under the Federalist American system have a lot of freedom to move around various axes for these domains. And so I was able to see how a change, right? So when we talk about education in Central Falls, we've been under the longest state takeover of a school district in the history of the United States. So Providence gets a lot of media coverage last year, but really what we should be talking about is this. This was the precedent. This is where it started, and this is the longest one ever in America. And what are the lessons learned from that? Well, when you go through the publicly available documents on RIDE's website, you see there's a little asterisk with italicized phrases about how the state exempts itself from making in-year adjustments on student spending. And so that's part of why our budget is always in crisis in CF. We have a very transient student population. So we have a lot of kids who move in, a lot of kids who move out. From the spring of 2018 to today, we've had more than 300 kids enter the district, but we're still budgeted for the number of 300 kids before. And so it's the level of attention to detail that I think I was able to get from starting to scratch these issues at the city level that I can now really bring to the state level and say, listen, I know you didn't read that bill you sponsored, because most of the folks who sponsor stuff aren't reading it. They weren't even in the process of writing it. In full transparency, we have a really dope solicitor who has helped me create most of the stuff, but I read everything that has my name on it. That is not true for most of our legislators. And the way that legislating actually happens is you have a group. Sometimes they're good guys, sometimes they're bad guys that come to you and say, hey, look, we have this draft that we think would be really helpful. Will you put your name on it and champion it for us? And usually the groups that we see as the good guys don't have the same level of resources as the bad guys. And so the bad guys have way more access, way more airtime with our legislators and convince them to put their name on stuff. I am now convinced that most of our legislators who are kind of quote bad guys aren't doing so on purpose. They just weren't paying attention to the details. They weren't trained to read this stuff. They weren't trained on the history of some of these policies and what the long-term consequences of them are. I was able to see it at the municipal level, and I think I bring that eye to the state level now when I'm going to become a state senator. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Acosta. Again, I'd like to remind everyone watching us on Facebook Live, if you want to go chime in with questions for our panelists, please do so now, and we'll go to audience questions after this individual question to Senator Oyer. So last session you passed, really exciting legislation, the Student Loan Bill of Rights, something that our organization testified for, try to do the best that we could to promote legislation that protects student loan borrowers. And, Rhode Island has, top 5 average of student loan debt in the country. Huge problem, not only in Rhode Island, but huge problem in the country. And so you go from running for office, having your messaging, talking about, issues that you're looking to tackle, things that you're looking to sort of do for your community. You're able to sort of get in there, and now you're helping pass important legislation. How has it felt to go from running for office, sharing ideas, to now actually getting work done up in the State House?
I mean, that's got to be obviously one of my favorite bills that we did, and I've got to say that really does make all of the work worthwhile when you see all of your work come to fruition, like with that bill. I think, being able to help prioritize what the legislative agenda is going to be is incredibly satisfying, and it makes all of the hard work worth it when you see a bill that you worked so hard on get across the finish line. And I have to say, this year, the licensure reform bill, I think, is one of the most important bills that we passed this year. And, I was a lead co-sponsor on that, but I was not the lead sponsor on it. But, being able to influence both the conversations in what bills are being drafted, how they're being drafted. And I think, there is a ton of reading. There is absolutely, definitely different groups come with legislation that they want to have introduced, and I have to say the weight of that is huge. I read everything. I read everything that I sponsor. I read the memos that we get from staff on what different bill elements do, and and on the student loan bill. That was an enormous amount of pressure to make sure that we got it right, because as that bill did get amended. And so, anytime you're looking at amending a bill, there's a lot of pressure to make sure that it's not just about reading the words on the page, but it's also understanding the impact of those words on the page. And, you talk to 3 different lawyers and you'll get 3 different opinions. So trying to make sure that you're really getting all of the information that you need to make sure that you're making the right decision for your constituents and for the state, I think is incredibly important. But there's definitely nothing more satisfying than I have done than, being able to pass good legislation like the Student Loan Bill of Rights. And it's great now because I definitely have people who have reached out to me about concerns or issues with their student loans, and I'm able to direct them to the Attorney General's office and to be able to follow up on that process. So I know that there have definitely been people who have taken advantage of that law already, and it's a really great feeling to know that something that I worked so hard on is actually helping people in their daily life. So I'm thrilled about that, obviously.
Thank you, and thank you for all that, and thank you again for your work with the Student Loan Bill of Rights. So now's the time for some audience questions. So if you have the questions, put it in the comments right now. I know we have a few right here. I see one of them from Alicia. It says, is it necessary to be an extroverted and social individual to be a viable candidate for office? How did you first get involved in your communities? Does anyone want to take this for Alicia? All right, Senator Oyer, you raised your hand first.
I'm absolutely not an extrovert. I'm definitely an introvert. I take a lot of alone time. My dog and I go for a lot of walks. I'm very fortunate to live in Newport to enjoy that as some recharge time. But, I think it's like anything else that you do that's hard, is that you need to make sure that you have the time and the processes that you need to basically be able to recharge, to take care of yourself. You know, and I mean, you do need to be able to hold on a conversation, obviously, with other people, but I don't think you need to be extroverted to do that. And so, you know, I actually started to get involved just by volunteering for local nonprofits, showing up to community meetings, community events. Again, obviously right now that's a little bit more complicated, but a lot of people have shifted to live stream events like this, and virtual meetings. And the thing that I find, and that I found throughout the campaign, was that there are certain steps in the campaign, and every kind of step prepared you for the next step. So, you know, I went to these events. I knew a lot of the community people that I had worked with on events. And so, you know, you go to an event that's a community-based event, now you know somebody. And so when I ran for office, I had kind of my little crew of people that I would know when I went to campaign events. And then gathering signatures, that kind of gave me an extra level of confidence of, okay, I can do this. Let's have some more conversations. So you kind of, the process of running for office kind of builds onto itself. But I would say just make sure that, you know what, you definitely need to know what it is that you need to be able to recharge so that you can give your all into running for office and then serving.
Thank you. Councilman Acosta, you also raised your hand. You gave me the finger.
I would just add that, being aware of your strengths and weaknesses is a big part of being a candidate. And so if you feel like you're introverted, then surrounding yourself by people who are extroverted and who are going to do that for you and carry your message for you is important. If not, then you can flip it, right? So like Jason was saying, right now he's not knocking doors. If he had a timid candidate, he might be the person who needed to be knocking doors with his candidate. If you have someone who's more extroverted, then I think you don't have to worry about it. But I think the second part of the question is more important, which is how do you first get involved in the community? And I've gone, this was the first year since I graduated high school that I didn't go back to speak to seniors in my high school. I had a teacher who I held very close to me. And one of the things that I tried to tell those students every year was, regardless of what your interests are, what your passion are, how like fringe or just unique they may be, there's a way for you to use that and give back to other people. And so everybody has to find their thing. There are some that are like super obvious, right? So a bunch of kids are graduating and want to go into the medical field. And so volunteering at a clinic or something like that is like a clear line. Or you want to go to law school, so you're a legal aid. But, for me, it was something as simple as being a coach. I was in sports when I was in high school and found that gave me a lot of structure and helped put me on a good path. And so I became a coach. And I think if you start with something that's really close to you, it's one, authentic, but two, helps you grow along the ways that the senator was saying. You start to meet people. You start to meet parents, siblings, aunts, cousins, kids, or what have you. And that gives you the authenticity that you actually need to be running for office. But I think it starts with something that you really care about. And it could be anything, literally anything, as long as you really care about it.
Yeah, that's good advice, to do what you're passionate about, and the rest will just become naturally with you. Jason, anything to add from that? Because you probably worked with candidates who are both introverts and extroverts.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it really doesn't matter if you're an introvert or extrovert. Also, I just want to highlight that I'm going after Senator and Councilman Acosta. So thank you again for that, by the way. No, it certainly does not matter. If the first step, if you want to get more involved in your community, look to see if there's any neighborhood associations and things like that you can help out and be a part of. But you certainly don't have to be an introvert or extrovert. And I'm hoping that none of my candidates are watching this right now, because I said that I don't really have to knock on doors this cycle, and I don't want them to.
Well, I'm sure they are in supporting you, just like you're supporting them. So get ready for a few phone calls or text messages. I think we have one other comment from Arbiter Strategy and Media. No, that may be from my back in my 2008 days working for Obama's campaign. The answer is yes. Pod 1 was the best pod during the 2008 campaign in Florida. We had a great boss named Byron Wellman. I'm I'm sure he's the man behind that brand. And we learned a lot. One thing I learned in that campaign is that the power of the people when we come together. That was what was beautiful about that campaign, is that it really engaged a whole host of folks from all age groups and all demographics to be involved with their government.
Which campaign?
Barack Obama's campaign for change in 2008. I almost just started talking like a Southerner because that's what you had to do when you worked in South Georgia. But that was what was powerful about that. Thank you for that, Byron. We got one more question, and then we'll go to closing thoughts. So this is, what do you think about raising the wage of state representatives to a living wage, such as $60,000 a year, so they can devote their full time to their duties?
Can I throw my opinion out there?
Yeah.
Since I'm not running for office, I think that elected officials should be getting paid for full-time work. I think that could be, controversial, but understanding what not only city councils do, general assembly members do, part-time salaries, y'all are dealing with full-time jobs. So I just want to throw out there, as someone that's not running for office, and I know it could be a controversial, I think individuals should be getting paid full-time. In Massachusetts, they're doing it. In other states, they're doing it. Cities doing it. But to the panelists, sorry, just wanted to chime in.
No, that's perfect. It's not just for the panelists; it's also for you, Travis. But Senator Oyer, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I'm happy to weigh in on this. I think that the treatment, I mean, it's a full-time job. I don't know anybody who does this job and doesn't do it full-time. And so, I think the reality is, if we don't, well, first of all, I agree with Travis. It's going to be incredibly unpopular, and I don't see it passing anytime soon. So just that caveat out there. But, from my experience, one of the things that I know that I worried about personally, I mean, I'm not independently wealthy. I have student loans. And so I really had to think about that when I ran for office, about how can I afford to do this? I happen to be a lawyer, and so I work for myself. And so, thankfully my clients are forgiving of my time that I spend on the Senate. But there's a reason that there's a certain demographic that is in the assembly, and it's because it's people who have flexible jobs. It's people who can afford to be up there. And, I think that, if we did look at having it treated as a full-time position, living wage, I think we would have a more diversity of opinions and backgrounds of folks who would be willing and able to run and serve. So, yeah.
Thank you. And just because I don't want you to go last, Jason, before we pass it over to Jonathan, what's your quick answer on that? Just because we only have 2 minutes.
Okay. Quick answer is absolutely. If you're expected to advocate full time, and on top of dealing with the BS of being an elected official in the state house, right? I think you should absolutely. So, quick answer, yes.
And is this a question that you would like to respond to, Councilman Acosta?
I just say quickly that we can look at other models. So there are countries in where you make what you made before coming into office when you go into office, and you have to go back to making that when you leave, to make sure that you don't use office in order to enrich yourself or your family or what have you. So I do think that people should make a living wage, and if you're putting in full-time work, that you should be compensated for it. But I also don't think it should be a springboard to go out and make yourself wealthy. But I agree with a lot of what the senator said and what Jason said.
Okay, as we're looking to close out of this series, this event, I want to thank our panelists for being here, and I want to offer our panelists any sort of closing thoughts. Jason, we'll start with you.
I just want to thank you guys for hosting this event and for allowing me to be on a panel. I've been watching this. I've been watching your panel discussion since the very beginning of the quarantine, and they've all been thoughtful and informative. So thank you so much. Please, everyone, vote in September. Vote in November. Vote by mail. If you're not registered to vote, the last days to register to vote is August 9th. Early voting starts August 19th. Please, please vote. Your vote matters. Your vote counts, and your vote matters. That is all.
Councilman Acosta, and then Senator Oyer.
Sure. I just want to thank you all for putting this event together, and to everyone watching, thank you for joining us. What I'd say is please be involved. It could be as simple as making phone calls. If you feel safe, you can knock doors for a campaign. But in addition to being involved and voting, hold your elected officials accountable. Like, don't let yourself go down a road where you feel helpless or powerless or like we're stuck. These folks must listen to you. It is their job to listen to you. And so you should never feel bad about complaining or screaming at them. It is their job to have to bear that. And if they don't like it, then, pick another job. And so thank everybody for joining us. Please check out our website, www.johnacosta.com, or on Facebook, Acosta for RI. And thanks again for hosting this event.
Thank you, Senator Oyer.
So I want to say thank you as well for hosting this panel, and thank you for my fellow panelists for a good and interesting discussion. And in closing, I just want to quote John Lewis, in that democracy is not a state, it is an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. So I hope everybody votes and everybody gets involved.
Thank you all. And for anyone that either is watching right now or will watch at a later time, thank you so much for participating. Again, you can always stay involved with Millennial Rhode Island, either on www.millennialrhodeisland.com, our Facebook, Instagram, and our Twitter. Want to give a shout out to Ben Barber, who's behind the scenes, making sure producing sort of our streaming. And as always, Trailblaze PVD and Chris Parisi for helping produce and put together this event. Thank you all. 5:30, definitely time for me to have dinner. And again, good luck on all the campaigns.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night.